Testing a one, a two, a three. Hey, let's talk about Sinners. I mean the movie, not literal sinners. That would be a bigger discussion. So I know that I said I wasn't going to do this whole review thing with movies, that this wasn't going to be a channel dedicated to that, or something like that. But if you don't want me to do reviews, then you got to tell these filmmakers to stop making movies that are so good. Like the thing is, horror movies are a worthy thing for me to talk about. Any time of the day, any time of the week, any hour, any given moment that I am breathing is a good time for me to talk about horror movies. And that is because horror, and horror movies in particular, are my special interests. So I'm likely to talk a lot about it if you bring it up, or you don't bring it up, or whatever. But it is a rare thing if you fuck around and hit my special interest within my special interest. If you should happen to do that, sit down, get comfortable, pack a lunch. We're going to be here for a while. No, seriously, pack a lunch. We are going to be here for a while. So, yeah, that brings us to the discussion at hand, Ryan Coogler's Sinners. So, off the rip, I was in. If you told me Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler were just standing together in a photo, I'd be on my way to download it before you finish the sentence. But then you add black vampires in the South? Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your damn voice. And I know that there are probably quite a few of you out there that don't get this. Okay, you might be fans of Michael B. Jordan, and you might be fans of Ryan Coogler. You might have seen Black Panther a bunch of times. Okay, you're down with that collaboration. But what you have to understand is that this is a vampire movie set in the South in a particular time period. And maybe too, maybe you have been chomping at the bit for a good black vampire movie for quite some time. We're simpatico on that. That I understand. But what you have to understand is that what has happened with Sinners is that it's not just a black vampire movie. It is a Southern Gothic vampire movie. Now, keep in mind, I didn't specifically say a Southern Gothic horror movie, and that's because, in my personal opinion, Southern Gothic stories are kind of their own thing. And that thing is often attributed to horror because, well, the nature of where the stories come from. So, that being said, before we get off into my thoughts about the movie Sinners and how it falls into the Southern Gothic category, you guessed it, we're going to have to do a little bit of history on Southern Gothic storytelling. Okay, so literarily speaking, Southern Gothic is a genre that explores the darker side of life in the southern United States. And if you know anything about the history of the American South, one could suggest that any story taking place in the southern United States could be considered Southern Gothic. But that's not really the case because we're not talking just about stories from the South. Southern Gothic is a little more than just a story that happens to take place in a particular setting. Southern Gothic is a story that's told through the soul of a community that's existed there for more than 400 years. It's the difference between Gone with the Wind and A Streetcar Named Desire, for example. While Gone with the Wind kind of glamorizes the world of Southern living from the outside, Streetcar gives us a story from a place underneath all of that. Like you'd never hear a tale about domestic abuse or abortion in Gone with the Wind. And if you did, it would be heavily coded so that you would need a professor to analyze it to even know what they were talking about. So, okay, we're talking about movies like A Streetcar Named Desire and Night of the Hunter and To Kill a Mockingbird, for example. Those stories are told by the ancestors, through the ancestors that lived there in those times. And because it's told that way, there's no real sugarcoating it. There's no big fancy dresses made out of curtains in a Southern Gothic film, unless it's accompanied by a really, really tragic event. Under the genre of Southern Gothic, these stories become haunting folk tales rather than just stories being told in a particular setting. And that is because the South is a setting that's not really like any other. Now, my personal belief about that is that the South's history surrounding the indigenous people of the land and the Africans that were enslaved here changed the very fabric of society below the Mason Dixon line. While I'm not going to get too deep into all of that, I will say that the end result of everything that has happened and is still happening in the South has, well, it's seeped into the very soil here. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be too far fetched to say that the South is both a blessed and a cursed place. So, what happens when you tell a story in a place like that? Well, you end up with very chilling and very haunting tales of grief mixed with joy, mixed with mysticism and folklore. There's something truly ancient and beautiful about the telling of a Southern Gothic story, especially if it's done right. Which leads us to the topic at hand, Ryan Coogler's motherfucking masterpiece, Sinners. Is it too soon to call Sinners a masterpiece? I don't think so. Not in this case. Okay, so buckle in, because this is going to take a minute. So, once upon a time, there was a young boy who loved playing the blues, presumably in all the local juke joints and whatever. Juke joints, by the way, if you don't know what they were, the closest thing I can compare them to would probably be a rave. You know, they were like pop-up clubs that happened during Prohibition in particular. They're basically gatherings in old buildings or whatever. And they were usually out in the middle of nowhere, and they were typically going on in the black community in the South. Like a Jew joint was basically the speakeasy of the South, during Prohibition, except it wasn't really hidden behind any secret walls or anything. Everyone within the black community knew where the Jew joint was. And that's actually pretty interesting because they were still subject to raids, like speakeasies were and raves are. I don't know if raves are still a thing, but anyway, they were still subject to raids because a lot of what was going on within the juke joint was illegal as fuck. Okay, so it's important to note that the antithesis of going to a juke joint during this time period was going to church. And within Southern Black communities, there has always been a very big, very black, very bold line between the light and the darkness, which is funny because much of Southern Gothic deals with the gray area in between that line. Anyway, our main character is Sammy. Sammy is a very talented blues singer and guitarist who also happens to be the son of a preacher. As you can imagine, Sammy kind of lives in that gray area I was just referring to. He's a good person. He works hard all day long, takes care of his mother and his siblings, and he wants to be respectful to his pastor father. He also happens to want to sing the blues really bad. And for a church going kid in the 1930s, that was a no no. Enter his cousins, twin brothers Smoke and Stack. I believe I read somewhere that their names come from Howlin' Wolf's song Smokestack Lightning, but I didn't have time to find out if that's true or not. Okay, so Smoke and Stack have just come back from Chicago and they're looking to start up a juke joint. Smoke and Stack, by the way, are both played by Michael B. Jordan. And I gotta pause for a second just to say, as a Gen Xer who is old enough to remember the beginnings of the splitting the actor in two on screen, for years it's been pretty hokey. Like you could totally see the strings, for lack of a better term. But even for then, if the actor was good enough, you would tend to forget that there was only one person playing both parts. I gotta tell you, I can't tell you how happy it was for me to see the twin trick updated in some really, really cool ways. Not to mention, Michael B. Jordan plays the hell out of these parts. I mean, you do forget that it's just one guy playing two characters at a certain point in the movie. But yeah, so that's the setup, okay? Now, this movie is done in Dusk Till Dawn style. What that means, if you haven't seen Dusk Till Dawn, is that half of the movie is just us getting to know our main players, and the other half is the horror part. But in that first half, we find out some pretty important information about all of our main characters. Okay, so first we have Sammy. Sammy, who we know, wants to play the blues, and he's really really good at it. And incidentally, where did Ryan Coogler dig Miles Caton up? He plays Sammy, and he has the voice of an 82-year-old blues player. Like, I don't think I have ever heard a more soulful tone come out of a man who can't be older than 12. That's a joke, y'all. I know he's older than that. So then we've got Smoke and Stack, who are, for lack of a better term, gangsters. And they are gangsters up to some gangster shit. I mean, they've just come back to town from Chicago to start up a juke joint during Prohibition. So, and it's important to point out that if you were doing illegal shit during the 30s and you were living in Chicago, it's almost 100% that you were caught up in some kind of mobster trade. I'm pretty sure somewhere in there they allude to the two of them being acquainted with Al Capone, which tells us that not only were they doing illegal shit, but they were doing serious illegal shit. And in all likelihood, they probably had to stab a few mobsters in the back just to come back to town in the first place. Now, Smoke and Stack each have complicated relationships with the women in their lives. These are women that they left behind when they went off to Chicago. And now that they're back, so are the women. Okay, so Smoke's ex girlfriend is Annie, who's played by Wunmi Mosaku. Which, by the way, if you listen to my whole essay on horror noir, you probably are familiar with her because she was in His House. And if you haven't seen His House, shame on you. Dishonor on you. Dishonor on your cow. Go watch that movie. Pause this and go watch it. No, don't do that because we're talking about sinners right now. So we'll just keep rolling. But you should watch His House. It is a brilliant movie. Definitely put it on your list. Anyway, Annie's character is not unfamiliar with the ancient practices belonging to the African ancestors. That's important not only for the plot, but also it seems to align a little bit with Smoke's character. Like, this is really the kind of grounded woman that he would be into. Stack, on the other hand, his girl is Mary, and Mary is played by Haley Steinfeld. Now, I've heard that there's a little bit of discourse about Haley playing her character being that she was mixed race. Well, a little more than mixed race. Mary is a white passing woman of color, we'll say. By the definition of black people in the Jim Crow South, she is considered a black woman. She's probably 1/8 black, but she's still considered black because there was this whole rule that said that if you had one drop of African blood, then you were a black person. Now, I haven't been paying enough attention to the discourse about this with Haley Steinfeld in particular, and I don't care because it's not really that important to the story. It is important to the culture that this whole thing is taking place in, but not really to the plot. Take that how you want it. So, okay, next on the list we have Delta Slim, and Delta Slim is played by Delroy Lindo. Delta is a blues piano player and an alcoholic who Stack convinces to play at the juke joint virtually for free. I mean, he does offer him money, but also mostly he offers him beer from up north, which is kind of hard to come by in the South during this time period. Random fun fact, Lindo actually said in an interview that he didn't play his character like it was a horror movie. He stated that when he read the script, it translated to him like something that happens in a community when it's infiltrated and then it turns on itself, which we will get to that in a little bit. Just hang on a second. And finally, rounding out the major characters are the Chows, Grace and Bo. Grace and Bo own the general store in town, something that's both important to the plot and to the culture to which we are speaking. And that is because, in case you didn't notice by their names or the pictures that I have flashed of them on the screen, presumably I'm talking to future me who's editing this right now. These characters are Asians and they're living in the 1930s in the Mississippi Delta. And that is because the Chinese actually lived and prospered during that time period in the Mississippi Delta. Being that Jim Crow was very much a thing, the Chinese were able to find opportunity in predominantly black areas where white store owners and business owners would not sell to black folks. The Chinese would. On the same token, The Chinese could also sell their profits to white folks as well. They uniquely could cross back and forth across race lines. In other words, they were part of both communities. Something that is important to this whole thing as well, but again, we'll get to that. There's also our villain, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so Smoke and Stack in the first half of this movie roll into town. They're doing gangster shit, and they reach out to Cousin Sammy because Cousin Sammy can sing the blues. In this first half, we meet all of our major players that I've just mentioned, and we see Smoke and Stack reconcile the relationships they left behind with some varying results. Stack doesn't do nearly as well as Smoke does. Let's just put it like that. We learn that Smoke had a child with Annie at some point, who unfortunately passed away prior to all of these events. And from Stack, we learn that Mary, the girl that he left behind, he left high and dry after performing what I assume has to be some amazing head game. Which, by the way, Ryan Coogler wrote the script, and I have to wonder exactly how obsessed this man is with oral activities. Like, there are no less than 3 or 4 references to taking trips downtown in this movie, which, for an R rated movie, is still about 2 or 3 too many. And listen, I am not a prude by any stretch of the imagination, but what I do know is that once or twice is accidental. More than 3 is a pattern and possibly a message. Apparently, Coogler really wants us to know that he enjoys using his mouth. So, once the scene is set and the characters are in place, we are introduced to our villain, Remick. Now, if you are watching this movie blind, I think you would still know enough at the beginning of Remick's first appearance to know that he's not exactly human. I mean, he jumps into the first scene whilst smoking without the aid of cigarettes. So anyway, he shows up at the door of a little farm couple that also happens to be white and also clan members, which that is important later on in the movie, but I digress. He shows up at their front door and he's asking them for shelter. I don't remember what excuse he gives them, but they, take pity on him and they agree to let him in. A little while after this happens, a large group of Native Americans roll up to the couple's house and ask them, "Hey, have you seen this dude about 5'11", looks a little demonic?" The wife, being a Southern white woman of a certain time period, replies, "Nah, we ain't seen him. Get off my lawn." He probably hurls a racial slur or two at them. The main dude asking doesn't push the matter. In fact, he just goes, "Yeah, okay. We know he's in there, but whatever. May God have mercy on your soul. Peace." And he leaves, which has got to be the most no safe spaces for racist thing I've ever seen in my life. But also, this is kind of, I think, the only plot hole in this movie, for me anyway, because I was really expecting to see them again at some point. You are not greeted again with Native American vampire hunters. This is the only scene that they show up in. Now, the why of that, I personally have speculated probably has something to do with territory and where they're allowed and where they're not allowed in that time period, and that's my guess anyway. Anyway, they leave. Wife goes to find the husband, only to find that Remick has already done away with the husband. Well, not done away with as much as turned anyway. And now she realizes she's doomed as well. And so this is the part where we've pretty much crossed over into the horror movie portion of this film. Meanwhile, presumably on the other side of town, Smoke and Stack are getting their juke joint up and running. We see a little montage of all the characters getting it together. We got cornbread at the door. We got Annie cooking food for the guests. We have the Asian couple, the Chows, making the sign and serving the drinks or getting the drinks together. Like, it's really about to be a real party in the woods, right? Oh, yeah, by the way, there's one other minor character, Pearline. She likes Sammy, Sammy likes her. That's basically how that goes. Oh, and she can sing. They gave her a really, actually kind of cool moment in this movie where she does get on stage and sing, and like literally the whole place is jumping. it's a pretty cool visual shot. But like everything's everything with the juke joint. The people are coming in, everybody's having a good time, everybody's drinking and dancing and eating, and it's all great. And then Sammy makes his big debut. He starts singing and playing the song, and the sequence that occurs at this moment is probably it's really great. It's just all the way great. See, at the beginning of this movie, we're told that every culture has a person within it who has the ability to split the veil between the living and the dead by use of their music or their singing or their dancing. They have the ability to actually merge worlds with using their talent. In this story, Sammy is that guy. And in this sequence, as he plays, we see African dancers dancing through the crowd. We see uh, a rock star from the future. You know, we see b-boys b-boying. We even we even see a little bit of the Chow's culture with a Chinese dancer floating through the crowd. It's really an amazing, beautiful scene. And it's really cool, except for the fact that it draws Remic's attention. So Remic, whose attention is now drawn to this music, takes his new thralls and walks up to the door of the juke joint and is like, "Hey, we're traveling singers. Let us in so that we can perform." All right, so that's one of the cool things about this movie is how key elements aren't really explained. Like a lot of the rules of everything actually in this movie um, aren't explained. It's just kind of assumed that you either already know or that you're probably going to Google it later. And the same is true for Remick the Vampire. We know what the rules are for vampires, generally speaking, but we know from this interaction that this is a vampire rule. Remick has to be asked to come in. Any vampire has to be asked to come in. Got it? Good. The thing is, Remick's a white dude by their eyes. He's actually Irish, but he's a white dude by their eyes. And this is the Jim Crow South. So they're like, "Nah, man, we good." To which Remick isn't impolite. He says, "All right, cool, no problem. We'll just hang out here until you change your mind." Which, as we find out as the story goes on, is very, very bad. You see, what they don't realize at this point, because they don't know that Remick is a vampire, is that he is the apex predator in this equation. All he's doing right now is sitting and waiting outside for somebody to come out, which, as it happens, that's exactly what goes down. So there's a little bit of a back and forth with Smoke and Stack about the amount of money that they're making in the juke joint. Mary, susses it out and she confronts Stack about it. Through their conversation, we learn that this juke joint thing is just a way for them to make a whole lot of money because maybe a lot of what they have in terms of the alcohol was stolen from some very scary gangsters. So they need to make a butt ton of money if they're going to make it out of whatever trouble that they're in. Now, Mary sees this and she sees this as her opportunity to help Stack out. And she says to him, "Look, those singers at the door, they probably have a whole lot of money. They're white people. They probably are going to come in, they're going to drink a whole lot, spend a whole lot of money, and that'll help even things out, right? Right, good. I'm going to go talk to him." Now, I know what you're thinking. Why? Why would Stack let his girl go out there and talk to some strangers? Because she's white passing. Because she's white passing. She, if she's not white passing, she's not going to go out there because by everyone's definition, they're not going to listen to her, right? So she won't be able to negotiate properly. So yeah, I take back my earlier statement. It is kind of important to the plot that she's white passing, but I digress. Now, Mary going out there, unfortunately, means that Mary doesn't come back in the same. She gets the golden prize of being the first person in the major cast to be turned into a vampire. And after being turned, she goes back into the juke joint, rubs up on Stack, and, well, Stack also becomes a vampire. But the way it goes down is pretty interesting. So Smoke is the one who discovers Mary in the middle of turning him. And he does what any brother would do when they see somebody attacking his brother. He shoots her a bunch of times. She goes down, she gets right back up, and she runs out. Like, does a full sprint out the front door. It takes Smoke an inordinate amount of time to even process what has just happened. Okay, his brother, to his eyes, has been killed. The woman who killed him, he shot a bunch of times, just split out the front door. Annie gets it right away because she's our hoodoo voodoo chick. She tries to warn Smoke, and it takes him a minute. I mean, he just lost his brother. It takes him a minute. But in the time that it takes Smoke to get with the program of what's actually happening, he ends up saying, "Hey, party's over. Shut down, everybody out." So all the patrons, with the exception of our main cast, all file out into the night, creating a buffet for Remick. Side note, Grace Chow's husband, Bo, also goes out to get the car because he's like, yeah, things are a little too crazy right now. We should probably get going. And this is interesting how this is happening because the only person that knows that something is really, really bad that happening right now is Annie because she is not unfamiliar with dark-sided behavior. But she manages to convince the Smoke just in time that there's some supernatural shit happening. When I say just in time, I mean one of their people comes back and asks to be let in. One of their people being the bouncer, Cornbread. Cornbread is asking to be let in. He's standing at the open door of a juke joint and asking to be let back in. And here is, I think, the moment that Smoke understands what's happening. Their buddy Cornbread is a big guy. He could just walk in if he wanted to, knock everybody over if he wanted to, but he doesn't. Why not? To that moment, the Cornbread tricks Smoke into extending his hand out of the door and tries to attack him. When he does, everybody gets up to speed. Cornbread ain't Cornbread no more. Cornbread is a freaking vampire. Close the door. Vampires. They're all dealing with fucking vampires. Okay, so once everybody has the program, they decide that they all have to stay in the juke joint until dawn. And then it's all good. Of course, Remick does not make that easy for them because what we find out during his siege against them is that he's not really looking for them. He's looking for Sammy. Okay, so by the context clues of the story that he tells, Remick is an Irish dude from Ireland. He has been around long enough to have experienced a time when the Christians in Ireland took his land, which historically speaking puts Remick's age somewhere between maybe 500 and 600 years old. And I had to look that up because I saw a TikTok dating Remick's age at around 1300 years old when the Christians started taking over Ireland. But according to a couple of other sources, they didn't actually start to take land until the 16th and 17th centuries. And this movie takes place in 1932, so I mean, hey, I'm not a historian and I'm terrible at math, so please feel free to correct me in the comments about that. So anyway, Remick wants Sammy because Sammy can connect to the other side. And if you think about it, Remick is a being that's been cut off from everyone because he's a vampire. I mean, imagine your loved ones, everyone you ever cared about is gone just by the fact that you have lived for 500 to 1300 years. And then one day in your travels, you find someone that can actually possibly lift that veil so maybe you could see some of them again. Some deep shit, right? In a way, the only thing that Remick wants is what was taken from him thanks to the ravages of time and the evils of man. He's like a culture vulture in the worst possible way for wanting Sammy's gift. Like, there's even a whole scene where he's dancing to an Irish folk song in a field with the rest of all who he has turned. It's kind of a mockery of Sam's power when he does it. That being said, I'm not gonna lie, kind of slapped when he hit that jig. So, okay, Remick also gains information about the person that he turns when he turns them. He basically, whatever he is, inhabits everyone that he turns. So he's got this army of vampires now at a certain point that he knows information about those people inside, and he uses that to try to get them out. That being said, at a certain point, he tries to use Grace's husband to lure her out. And when that doesn't work, he straight up just threatens to kill her daughter, who is at home during all this. And once Grace realizes that, she freaks the fuck out. I mean, she is trying to fight all the vampires. She is making Molotov cocktails. She's like, listen, I'm about it now. And like, who can really blame her? I mean, Remick just took her husband and threatened her child. In despair, she stops listening to everyone around her who's trying to tell her to be cool. And then she does the unthinkable. She screams out loud, "Come on in." So, like, this part of the movie I found to be really fascinating in relation to the history of the Chinese population in the Mississippi Delta. So, because they were in the unique position to be able to move between the black communities and the white communities during the Jim Crow era, they were able to, as they say, be in it but not of it. So, in a moment when the black characters really needed Grace to hold her ground and stand with them, she buckles. And mind you, I'm not blaming her for it because, I mean, Remick killed her husband and threatened their child. It's kind of understandable that she does it, but you can't really ignore the symbolism of that. Like, there are several points before this where we witness Grace and Bo helping out, but not really being a part of things. Grace even makes a comment to that earlier in the movie while she's serving drinks. And of course, when things start to get hairy, Bo is among the first to try to leave. All I'm saying is that Grace and Bo are outsiders inside of the outsiders. And so, with that being said, it's not really a surprise that when they needed her to be strong for the collective, she just couldn't do it. Her motivation to do so just wasn't the same as it was for everyone else's. And that's just the black and white of it. Okay, so Grace, despite everybody trying to get her to be cool, does not be cool, and she screams to all the vampires to come on in. Now we have reached the action portion of this movie. All the vampires run in, and the battle is on. One by one, our main characters are taken out by the vampires, but in very heroic ways. Like, everybody pretty much goes out like a G, not gonna lie. But in the end, the only one left standing is Sammy, and he's the one that's got to face off against Remick. And being that poor Sammy isn't a superhero, needless to say, he's cooked. Until Smoke swings in and saves the day. Smoke comes out of nowhere and kills Remick, basically ending the vampire siege because he does it as the sun comes up. And once the sun is up, all the vampires are wiped out. So we're at the end of the movie, and Smoke tells Sammy to go home and get right with God. It's basically the last scene of Dusk Till Dawn, when George Clooney tells Juliette Lewis to kick rocks when she asks to come with him to Mexico. The gangster is laying down some wisdom to the youngster. Stay good, basically. Sammy does go home, but he doesn't take Smoke's advice. Instead, he goes on and he lives his life and he plays the blues just like he always wanted to. And what happens to Smoke? Well, earlier in the movie, Smoke and Stack hurled a few threats at a Klansman. It just so happens that the white guy that they bought the old warehouse that they were going to have the juke joint in from um, was definitely a Klansman. And that guy was trying to cheat them. To which they were like, "Nah, do you know who the hell we are?" And somewhere during the course of the movie, Remick does warn Smoke that the Klansmen are going to be coming for them. See, because the first two that he turned were Klanspeople. See, I told you it was important. But Smoke is prepared, and apparently has been prepared this whole time because he gets out a ton of weapons just as the Klansmen are rolling up. Smoke manages to take out every single one of them before he catches a bullet himself. And. But yeah, like everybody else, he died like a G. Remember, kids, It's okay to punch a Nazi, or in this case, a Klansman, depending on where you are in the hemisphere. This movie is tens across the board, and I will fight anyone that says otherwise. It was, as they say, a triumph. And I imagine that people are going to be analyzing this one for years after this. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I'll see Tenerife do email me an invitation to a webinar about it any day now. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering, yes, there is an after credits scene in this movie, and it might make you a little misty-eyed. I spoiled a lot about this movie in this video, but I'm going to leave that part for you guys to experience on your own. So that's this week's video essay. This was a big one. Thank you again for listening to me rant for a little bit. I post about every 2 weeks, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you'll be the first to see my next post. With that said, see you next time. Bye.